Greetings and welcome to this exclusive Lunch Meet VHS video commentary for the student film adaptation of James O'Barr's iconic graphic novel, The Crow. My name is David. I'm the now 41-year-old filmmaker responsible for this project, and I'll be talking to you on this commentary about my remembrances of making the movie, which is something I engaged in from age 14 to 18 in the mid-90s, and I guess in some ways ever since. Just a quick thank you to Josh for setting all of this in motion. I happen to be, I'm recording this on October 3rd, 2020, which has, of course, been a pretty intense and hellacious year for all of us, and some more than others, of course. But I was spending a lot of time in the early days of quarantine working up a trailer for the Inertia documentary that chronicles the making of this adaptation of the small screen adaptation of The Crow, and thinking that would be the only thing I could share with the world, from this project. And so I was spending a lot of time with the original footage, and preparing this thing that was really only ever seen at a 2002 New York Independent Film and Video Festival, and yeah, I just thought that would kind of be it. And then out of nowhere, I heard from Josh via my website, and I had this opportunity to kind of remaster the movie in ways I'd only kind of dreamed about in the years since, and that's the version I'm going to watch along with you here today. I'm currently taking a break from creating video commentaries that are one from 1998, comprised of interviews from around that time with myself and other people involved in the making of the film, and another that was recorded in 2003 for what I thought would be the final version of the movie that was rescored to John Bergen's Trust Obey music soundtracks to the comic. But this version actually kind of incorporates both of those and then adds back things that I took out for some mysterious reason. Well, I kind of know why, and I'll tell you about it as we go along. So I'm going to start the movie, and you'll see it alongside of me as I just do my best to provide some insight and anecdotes. So here we go. Indie Films is was the moniker that my friend Matt, who made the film with me, we adopted for this. Prior to that, we were calling ourselves Skylark Pictures, which I think was just sounded cool, but named after the car company. Speaking of which, cars, so this is these opening shots are done with the VHS-C, which compact camcorder that we had strapped or kind of wrapped in a towel and duct taped to the hood of my Dodge car. And as soon as I was old enough to drive, I was driving through this the street in Rittman, Ohio, where we grew up and filmed this, called Industrial Street, actually, where there were two factories, a salt factory and a boxing company, not boxing like fighting, but to create boxes, cardboard boxes. Anyway, so I drove through and just kind of showed the parts that were the smoothest. And here you see, this is the graveyard there in town, and this white church kind of happens to match the side of my house where we filmed the rest of this grave scene. So when you see it, I guess you won't see it here, you see it later. It actually makes some sense that it's as though I'm buried right near the church there. So you see some shots here. We're needing to grab of the crow, the bird from the actual Miramax films. You see me crawling up out of my own grave there. It all happens pretty quickly, and then get your first glimpses of my pal Matt's character, the Skull Cowboy, which we adapted as a combination of the character from. Well, a character cut out from the big screen adaptation and the character in the comic book that never is explicitly named, but is kind of dressed like a cowboy. You see here Top Dollar and the character of TJ in an extra scene I wrote to kind of intercut with these scenes of Eric coming out of the grave and getting back to his house. So later on, you see Top Dollar and his gang kind of packaging up cocaine to sell, ostensibly. That's a direct scene from the comic, but this sort of is a scene written to kind of show where he got all that cocaine and establish him as a pretty bad guy. This was actually filmed in neighboring town of Wadsworth in a pretty cool kind of cross alley situation. And now this scene here, So you'd never know it from the way that we end up showing it here, but this creek that is actually next to this house that I'm about to walk into is, I don't know, maybe like 500 yards away from that graveyard. And it just so happened to be a house that had been abandoned and condemned and was going to be burnt down by the junior fire department in Rittman for practice. So we found out about that ahead of time and staged this scene of me walking into this house. And later on, you'll see some scenes of me like breaking a window, and eventually we burned the thing. Well, we didn't burn it down, but it was burnt down, and we got to be there and film it. This is the first scene I added back, and so because this whole idea of having a house in our movie that, that we ultimately kind of see burnt down was such tremendous production value that I don't know. This stuff doesn't look great, but it actually has me physically connected to this house that I just thought that was too good to kind of leave out. At the time, I think I took things out that didn't look so great, but now, 20 some years later, it's like looking at the stuff that I shot as a teenager. It's like, well, how much of it really looks that great at all? So let's at least like tell as much of the story and get as much of the kind of context of things and geography and, just get our money's worth here, so to speak. So there's the only little fleeting shots that tie this idea of a skull cowboy to Matt's character. And this was another scene that I wrote, though I wrote this one at age like 15. What we needed to start to kind of, before the comic begins, there's all this stuff, like there's no grave scene where he crawls out of his grave in the comic. And when the comic begins, Eric's already out kind of trying to track down the T-Bird and his gang. And so we're kind of trying to fill in some gaps here. And in the Miramax film, I think there was a scene with the Skull Cowboy actually in Eric's apartment in the original, in the script that they were working on filming, and some of those scenes were what was not completed because of Brandon Lee's untimely death. Where he kind of lays out some of the rules of Eric's mission. And we're kind of doing that here. The main thing we're establishing here is communicating to Eric, and I guess the audience, like what happened to him, and also kind of setting up a bit of an adversarial relationship between Eric and the Skull Cowboy. And so our Skull Cowboy was both a combination of what we knew this character to be, that was played by Michael Berryman and cut out of the big screen adaptation, but it also, for our purposes, serves he says all the lines that the bird says in the little bubbles in the comic. I mean, of course, not these, because these were added. I think I added a couple extra beats here, here to help. A lot of the changes between scenes were what I felt, looking at it again now, could use a little bit more breathing room. So like I extended this shot because, again, we were filming in a real thunderstorm here where there was lightning all around us, which you're about to see the best example of here right behind Alex, who plays Ratso. And I just how can I get more of this? And because all this unfolds really quickly. And so, yeah, I'm happy to have that little extra moment. And there's about 6 to 7 minutes added back that I cut out between all of the rough cutting I did to arrive at the finished, what was the kind of picture lock in 1998 that sort of and versions of that made its way around the internet, and I guess bootleg and file sharing in the meantime. So now we start to see Eric remembering Shelley by discovering these pictures in an old chest here with a mirror that I think we all know is going to happen to. What was nice is that I was able to tie the flashbacks that we show to actual pictures that we had, which was kind of cool. So here's another. I'm about to extend this scene considerably, well, relatively so, because it passed so fast in the version that it existed for years that it always bothered me, especially the music didn't have a chance to kind of play itself out and build to a crescendo. And then that first reveal of the makeup was something we filmed for that purpose but never included. There's a lot of relevance to trains in the book, and there you'll see here shortly a scene, kind of a dream sequence that took place on a train. So I added back that scene of the train that I just grabbed, I think, as we were running around town trying to film stuff whenever it rained. Now, the rain in this scene is actually a hose hooked up, because we staged this on the side of my house. And we rigged up this hose to spit rain as we did for like the grave scene or anytime we were in. Well, I guess it's really for those two scenes where we were close enough to a hose in my house to rig up. But it was nice because we had a consistent, downpour here. And you see this shot here was added back. I replayed this shot of just that you can barely see through the windshield there a lot to avoid showing Eric in makeup, and I cut a lot of these lines that were adapted from the comic book. It just felt, I guess I felt at the time that it was not a sufficiently cool enough reveal of Eric in his makeup, which at this point you would have still not seen. And, again, how good it all looks is relative, but I'm happy to have some of this back and some of this dialogue back that I kind of pieced together from various parts of the comic to kind of. I wanted a scene like the inertia chapter in the book, which we filmed and cut out. I mean, we filmed it in like June of '94, and it was just horrendous and embarrassing. You can see clips of it in one of the other video commentaries, but I wanted a scene like that, but not explicitly. And I wanted to have like that scene of Shelby and T-Bird in the car, and so this was a combination of those two things. This is an extra beat as well to show that Eric run away. In the comic, it's like actually Eric was on top of the car the whole time and shoots the passenger through the ceiling, but we kind of did it differently there. So this is the Shattered in the Head chapter in the book, and we mostly pieced together from trains and horses and crows that I found in other films, because I couldn't film any of those things for myself at the time. So I think there was a lot of like well, I don't know if I want to call it them. I mean, sure, why not? I think there's stuff from Natural Born Killers, from Nixon, from How to Make an American Quilt, from Before Sunrise. Even a short film of the close-up of my eye and stuff was like from a short film I made called Prison Cell of Circumstance. So here you see we're almost to like really starting the comic in earnest in terms of like sequential consecutive scenes that are directly from the comic. But you can tell here we did a bit of a combination. All this kind of confrontation leading up to the lines of "Rejoice to the full in the glory that is about to be yours," being kind of more of an adaptation of the Proyas film in the way that like Brandon Lee tackled Lawrence Mason and wrestled around there in the dirt. You can barely see this, obviously. So this is lit, by this one street light that you can kind of see behind me there. And that's one nice thing about consumer gear at that time. Like, you could film by street lights, and you'll see a scene following this that's all by candlelight, which most of the stuff in the attic was lit in that way. In fact, when I work professionally in like filmmaking now, and I have since around 1998 on and off, and it was a big learning curve for me when I finally used professional equipment, how much you do have to light things intentionally. But yeah, so Matt was like kind of crammed in this corner of my attic to get shots like that, and this one directly from my point of view. And it's very much now we're like getting into like direct shot for shot from the comic as best we could. Though, all of this is pieced together from quite a few years of filming. So there are times when certain things are out of order to kind of help with continuity of wardrobe, especially when we get into using the black electrical tape. And this here, like in the very early cuts, we'd have the narration of Eric, to build a temple to sadness. He ties a spent shell in his hair and says number 1. And I think there's a close-up of this bullet dangling from my wig, but we didn't use the tripod a lot in that first year of production. There you see me just like climb this fire escape, and we kind of tie it together in the editing. But if this scene was shot in my basement, as were many scenes to follow. Yeah. That was a moment there where James, who plays I think Sanchez in this, actually we were listening to the radio, or like not radio but tapes of things, and he thought he heard this artist of like Maggie Estep that really bothered him. So that was him actually hearing something and turning his head and like, what is that? So here you see all the action unfolds really quickly, both because we didn't know how to film it really successfully, and also just because there's only so many guys and so much space in which to kind of deal with all the, what unfolds in the book in a kind of a, you really set your own pace as a reader, whereas in a movie you gotta deal with real time. So I think here I tried to extend this moment of the Eric reflected in the blood, but in adding back things that I'd cut out over the years, I didn't want it to feel to me like a different movie. And because the rhythms and stuff, I don't know, they're all pretty set, and really took a long time to arrive at making the best of it as I could, 20 some years ago. So they're kind of minor changes, and like I said, a lot of it is added back from ways that were already intended. That was Kurt's idea, I believe, to shove his face in the cocaine there. Oh, well, no, I'm not sure if that was it. What it was he had an idea to dip the BB gun in the cocaine, so that when I pulled the trigger on the BB gun here, a little bit of like powder type came out, which you'll see. Oops, sorry to bump the mic there. Kind of looked like it, something coming out of the gun. So these are a couple shots I added in, I added in. They were never there, to create a little bit more space so that the narration didn't start immediately. And I think for years I had this without this car going through the shot, and you could actually, it was like this stationary shot it didn't cut into this close up in the, though I think in the rough cut it did, but you could just barely see any Eric, and I liked this idea that he was cloaked by night, but it actually was a little frustrating to just have it parked on this image and nothing really happened for 25 seconds. So I kind of put those things back in to create a little bit of space, and also just show the character a little bit more, and break up the shots so it's a little bit more interesting. So the rain here, so it was, we don't go out when it was actually raining, but as in a lot of any of the scenes that weren't like at my house and it was raining, was this, I think it's used to fertilize lawns, but we cleaned it out, we pumped it, we filled it full of water. I feel like it was only like this big or so. You pump it up, and then it would just kind of spray, and you could kind of control, like a shower head, you could control the way that the water came out, but we would kind of finesse it such that it was not a mist and it was not a single stream, and we'd light it, but we'd find ways to make sure that it was visible whenever possible in the shot. This was Matt's cat. Had various names over the years. I can't even remember what it was called at the time. And so there's certain things like I'd add back and all that, but like you'd watch now and be like, well, they're reading The Cat in the Hat, which is relevant to things said in the book. But what would have been great was to be filming on the other side so you could see the cover. But hindsight 2020, as is the year, and so many of the years how many years have passed. The majority of this was filmed from June 1994, soon after the film came out, to actually June of 1995. I remember we sort of filmed it for exactly a year. So this is a kind of an adaptation of a scene in the book where I think Shelley is like nude and Eric is kneeling before her, where the teeth of madness jump and dance and sing or something. But we sort of adapted with footage we did have and could show and have filmed as teenagers. I think there, like the footage, the shot of the crow bird with like red reflected in its eye came from a car commercial. So, I mean, for those years where I was working on this, like everything I was learning about filmmaking, everything was applied to this project. And I think, it would have, I'm sure it would have, I would better suited me to have been working on original material. I was just kind of carried with the momentum of, the inertia, if you will, of being like, this was the project I was on. And so you just keep going in that direction, unless affected by some outside force. And nothing was kind of pulling me as much as this was. And, it's interesting. I was rewatching the DVD, and I guess it's probably on the Blu-ray for The Crow, the movie with Brandon Lee. And there's a James O'Barr profile, and he was talking about, the real life tragedy of losing his girlfriend to a drunk driver, and even just his life kind of leading up to that in his basement. I'm in my basement now. he's drawing while he's talking about those things. And he said that, he met her when he was 16 years old, and they had like 2-3 years together before she died. Graduating high school, they were going to get married. And I guess seeing that now, he was 40, he said in that interview. I'm 41 now. It's just all kind of surreal. But I realized that the Eric and Shelley characterized in the book are obviously young people. They don't get specific about age or last name or any of that stuff. But it's really kind of talking about, or where he's coming from and what he's remembering and representing. It feels a little bit like a projection of, what I'm sure what their life was like to some extent. In the 2011 author's edition, there's that August Noel scene where Shelley kind of puts up the Christmas lights in the summer, and he said he didn't include that at the time because it was like so personal, and so I'm guessing it's kind of pretty specific. So, but it's just like this. It's such a sort of idealized version of young love, and I don't mean that to say that like that kind of love doesn't exist, but it makes sense to me now, seeing that and being reminded that the love he was experiencing, this first in extreme and pure love, was the kind you do when you're 16. And so I'm about that age in this piece, and so I don't know. In some scenes, especially some of the stuff coming up with like Mr. Gideon and a lot of it, like the fact that the cast is so young is distracting and odd. And thankfully I looked older, and you don't get the sense of scale with like how short I was and am. I'm about 5'8", and but anyway, I guess what I'm getting at is there's a lot of reasons why these themes would resonate with a young angsty teen, but I hadn't really considered it till just this week. This idea that even though Obar would have been writing about it later, like he was basically writing about a similar period in his life. So that was news to me. Then this extended scene here is kind of a combination between what does open the book with the fear chapter of Eric banging his head into the wall, and later scenes in the book where he's kind of around his house and cutting up his wrists. I think happened probably in the death book. But the reason we have it in this order and kind of strung it all together was because we'd already filmed scenes like the tom-tom scene to follow and Mr. Gideon the shot scene at the pawn shop, where I'd already had this electrical tape put on my arms and around my waist, which of course the waist bit is just directly from the Brandon Lee film, which even in that film it's cut out why he has tape around his waist, which we now know. I knew then, but now you can see the footage like of him fighting Fun Boy in Fun Boy's bedroom, where he cuts him up with a straight razor. And in that movie, the idea, it's laid out again by the Skull Cowboy, that the wounds, when he works for the living, when he helps Sarah essentially, that those wounds won't heal. And that's why they don't heal. In our movie, and I believe in the book, self-inflicted wounds don't heal, was sort of Obar's rule. Now here's a scene I added back that I don't even know why I cut out, which is the reveal that Eric was painting the Cat in the Hat in his own blood on the mirror. I think honestly that was an oversight at the time, or maybe I thought it looked too silly. I don't know, but we painted the Cat in the Hat in blood on that mirror at least 4 times and filmed it. And actually there were times where it looked a lot better, but I think the idea was more that it looked a little bit more realistic in terms of how someone might have done it with their fingers or something. So the young man there that was just stabbed and killed is my younger brother Brian, and so I added that shot back, like little things. The 6 or 7 minutes, I added this back, him there firing the gun. A lot of those 6 or 7 minutes they're added back are. This actually came from the first time we filmed this, and I was actually wielding an axe, not a samurai sword. Yeah, it was weird. I don't know. Kind of odd to be spending so much time modifying this, but I don't know, with the idea that folks might actually see it in a larger forum. I'd always kind of wanted to do some of this, and it seemed like a good excuse to do so. And with all the work from home, stay at home, I had extra time on my hands, and this was kind of oddly comforting thing to work on in this tumultuous time. There's the legs. Yeah, the severed legs. So my younger brother, that's what I was starting to tell you about. So he was, I can't remember. So I would have been 15 in this, and so he would have been 11. No. Yeah, 11, I think, 10 or 11. And so at the time, he was younger than this, so it made sense for him to play that part. But by the time we, what am I getting at? So what I'm trying to say is that he recorded the music that is the theme, sort of romantic theme for this film, which maybe I'll come back to later. But I think I wanted to be sure to mention it when he was on screen. So this end here where I turn off the light also came from the first time we filmed with Tom Tom. And I actually, though, didn't change the audio, which is sort of interesting that I said the line in the same way. So the Gideon's Pawn Shop scene here, this was in Matt's basement. This is a shot I grabbed off CNN at the time of fires in Detroit and a news report about Devil's Night. This door we kind of made from just a thin sheet of glass and put stickered letters on and spray painted it for the frost and broke over the crowbar here. I tried to break it with my hand, but I couldn't, embarrassingly. So that I think is stage right outside my garage. And sadly is a little out of focus. And now we're back in Matt's basement here. And I think we filmed this scene in its entirety twice, but a lot of inserts, and we did another scene with the first actor who played Mr. Jones. Kind of like that TJ Top Dollar scene with buying the cocaine. There was a extra pawn shop scene that we filmed that was terrible. So I extend this here because Doug was not a tremendous actor, nor were any of us. But and then I added this little flashback scene where our Shelley had taken off a ring that she had and put it on my pinky. And this was an extra shot here. And so what I did was I kind of soaked his screams in, not reverb, but something to make them sound muffled as though Eric's in his own world. And so that I could show more of this and kind of extend this moment without being distracted by his kind of howls of pain. And as it turned out, all those years ago, and I cut this out, but I put that ring on the same finger she did in that improvised moment from the flashback, which was kind of as neat the way it all worked out. And then as it comes back, this was this line I added and shot I added back. But as it comes back as he kind of comes out of it for Gideon to pull the gun on, and then the sound kind of comes out of that muffled state. And so that's something I think I technically could have done at the time, and all the footage was from at the time. But I'll admit that's an idea I didn't have. It came from time and experience. So I think, the scene's wrapping up. We did film when Albrecht kind of comes in, but that didn't play very well then. And I think we included it in the very first cut of our movie that we kind of distributed to our high school before coming back to it and augmenting it for another year or two. So, but anyway, the Albrecht scene was not strong enough for me to add back. And you can hear Albrecht on the phone here, kind of. We taped it on a little micro cassette recorder, but our Captain Hook here is actually, you can kind of see it literally reading from the comic book and just giving time for Albrecht to say his lines. So this was this teacher's office, and we just turned the light off. I think we filmed it once with the light on, and then a couple whatever months later we came back and said, can we do this again? Filmed these inserts of me, and these as though the police photographs later. Here's another shot that I knew I wanted to add back, that I just love the scope of that it shows so much of that kind of A-frame in the attic there. But at the time, I think I left it off because there was no Cat in the Hat in the mirror. So this was one of the more sophisticated things I did, I guess, to kind of tweak this old footage, is I did matte together in a way that I couldn't have done in 1998, the Cat in the Hat on the mirror there, which hopefully is pretty subtle. But I think that's the only thing digitally I did to kind of make this all play a bit better and to make that shot work. There are like a couple of frames I add back here that I just kind of like the way my face changes and darkens here, like right there. And well, I guess I added back this throwing the candle and stuff like that. Again, I'm not so sure why I took out. And so here, like this town that we're from, it was very small, and the fact that we were able to kind of find parts of it to make it look like Detroit is surprising to me even to this day. But so I'm about to walk into a shadow here, and we're about to make a cut, and that's a different location. I don't think we had actually planned that at the time, and thankfully the wardrobe worked out and all that. But this was actually we filmed the. Well, now that's a different area altogether then to kind of film the reverse here. Because actually what is on the other side of this building is just like soccer fields and such. And this is the grade school at the time. I mean, it still is. I believe it looks very different now. But, and this is my little sister. So my siblings and I are each 4 years apart. So she's 8 years younger than I am, which worked out well for, kids making a movie in which a kid is shown here. She's gone to heaven. She was very good at this stuff. She's a very, I think, sensitive person. And in one of our very early home video movies, we did this scene where this movie was called Watchful Eyes. And in the scene, she was being sent away because my character was being stalked and hunted for having witnessed a murder. And so we played the music from The Bodyguard. This is 1993. So like this trumpet music. And we played it live on in the cars we're filming. And she is trying so hard not to cry because she's not necessarily supposed to cry in the scene, but it reads so well because that's the thing about when you're acting or whatever, like it's kind of best when you're trying not to cry. It's perfect anyway. So really she just reacted to me and we tell her the line like we would most all the actors right before, and she just repeat it. And she did such a nice job, and I think makes these scenes suitably touching. So I extended this moment a bit to get more out of just seeing Eric and his shadow elongate here as the Raymond Chandler evening song is recited. And this is the one time I speak the narration, because it seemed to be from Eric's point of view, I guess, was the idea. This, I believe, was some sort of apartment complex. But of course we didn't film in there, like with the fire escape or the shot you just saw. We would kind of, I'd walk around, in this makeup downtown. It's such a small town too. I wonder sometimes if people are just like, oh, that's that almond kid doing his weird shit. This shot I had cut out and added back of kind of rising into frame here. This shot of the Cure album I actually filmed in 2020. You'll see it again at the end of the scene. I added these shots in here. Oh, my dog's barking. This is the first new thing filmed for James O'Barr's The Crow in over 20-some years. Quick insert of this Cure pornography album. Take off the wedding ring. Back it up a little. This is playing on screen at this time. Tossing on another jacket. This is the camera we filmed with back in 1994 through 7. Oops. It keeps dying. I'm not sure it's going to survive trying to accomplish this. Come on, you can do it. It burned out. God damn it. We'll try again in a few minutes. So you can see it kind of over my shoulder here, the Cure album, but I'd always wanted that in the movie once I knew that would be the song playing on the soundtrack, but I could not get a hold of a vinyl of the Cure's pornography album at that time. Like I had big black albums, I think Hammer Party. In your eyes. That must be in the back of that sack. But like I got these hard to find albums, but I could not find that album anywhere. And of course this was before eBay and all that. So when I knew I was going to be when I started to add more and more in, I'm like, it's weird. So I broke out the video camera that I initially filmed it with. This movie, it barely operates. It can't actually record to tape. and it would also even just burn up now. So I could kind of like I fed it in through this thing, and I recorded it on a VHS tape, and then digitized the tape, and made sure that it, went through the whole analog system. You'll see another shot of it as I walk out, and perhaps I'll include the cell phone video that I took to send along to Josh to be like, look what you did. You it inspired me to do this. So this is our pal Corey, who played Funboy, and this is, boy, we film with him the most. I mean, Funboy is the only one of the gang responsible for Eric and Shelley's deaths that isn't killed in their first encounter, and you can hear here his remnants of kind of. We just gonna asked each of them. I think I added this shot back because we filmed the Skull Cowboy, because in this scene the crow was on Eric's shoulder saying like track marks and yellow eyes, it's probably morphine and all this, and so we filmed those but cut them out because it didn't seem right, and now I'm suddenly second guessing whether I should put them back. Oh man, I'm thinking too hard about it. I think, one of the things in changing some of this is I wanted to make sure that the music timing that I was used to stayed the same. So a note about the music here is that this Cure song that's playing and spinning on this record was part of the soundtrack in 1998. And at that time, all of the score music came from the Graham Revell scores for the Crow movie. Here you can see, I think I took this out, but there, yeah, I put on like a leather jacket and I walked past the album so you can see it spinning there. And then this is actually Matt's basement bedroom. Anyway, a lot of different like locations woven together here. You see, I added back a lot of these lines, they're spoken from the like that and that shot, just to kind of extend this scene as well. And there's some cool shots. We thought of these cool moments that were like like Matt's character reflected in the picture there. There's him in broken shards of glass that were in this kind of first cut of the movie like that. It seemed, I don't know, pretty cool to me in hindsight, and so I extended it, kind of put it all back, I guess. Okay, so I'm trying to tell you so very many things. I was telling you about the music, and so the music for that 1998 cut that is probably still available on the internet and what all the bootlegs would have been made from was the Graham Revell stuff from the big screen movies. I had at that time, the 1994 graffiti edition with the Trust Obey music that Obar and John Bergen collaborated on to like as a score for the comic. And so there's some great cues there, like the Forever Now and also the Crow, that were already a big part of that soundtrack. But I mean, it's a long story, really. But in the movie was out there. I was kind of building this website to share it, and Miramax reached out. I was trying to get a hold of them and trying to get permission from some of the bands and stuff to include this music, because it was all music that was alluded to in the book or that I knew Obar to be listening to from the interviews that I read, and I did my best to kind of make it fit what was going on. And so I think one of the reasons I didn't add back shots of the Skull Cowboy in that scene with Funboy and Sandy is because there's a moment like in that scene where Eric's holding her face and she's looking at him, and on the soundtrack you suddenly hear "Girl at the Window Looks at Me for an Hour," and there's a lot of lyrical content like that went into my choice for those songs. It's very rich in commenting what's going on, and so I didn't want to change like the timing of it so that you wouldn't hear lines like that. Speaking of timing, this is something I added back. Actually, no, that I hadn't actually included in the 1998 cut. And so this shot of the poker table was like from another scene that we did in the gin mill that mirrored like the Fire It Up scene in the film. I think we did it one day when we couldn't get the necessary main bad guy there, but we had access to some others, and so we're like, well, we'll just film this and put it earlier in the movie. And it was in that first cut, but not included in any other. And so that shot then that just passed of me walking up, I had this idea, in extending it here now, adding back some of that, these kind of connective tissues in between scenes, but I was able to show a little extra beat, an intercut Eric approaching the gin mill and kind of have it ramp up a bit as opposed to just like jump right in the way I think we did. The gin mill door there. So I haven't talked about him nearly enough, but my partner on this project and the guy who plays the Skull Cowboy and my best friend since I was like in third grade. So Matt painted that. He's quite an amazing artist and makes his living, as such. And so whether it's fine art or sculpting or puppeteering. But so he painted that to mirror the gin mill door from the comic. And it's a spitting image. And at the time, that was his basement room. When his dad sold that house, that would have been in place, which I get a kick out of. So Fun Boy here, I don't know if you can tell, but in the last 5 minutes, he aged 2 years. So, yeah. Those are all inserts, though he was, of course, present for this scene with all these other guys when we filmed it in 1994, I think in the summer. We refilmed his stuff later to be a bit better. And inserts with that gentleman, like a lot of the other guys, like a few years after the fact, kind of supplement what we filmed on the day. This is my basement again, the same as his bedroom would have been. This is an axe, that was like a cutout axe that we got at the costume shop in 1994 when we bought that wig that I'm wearing and some of the other props. So you'll see this scene plays out very quickly. You see some of our kind of lighter trick that's just like flickering lighters in front of my face, or the bar, funnily enough, we kind of made best we could, but like I couldn't actually stand up, and so I'm hunched over there as I go across it. Or if you see me standing up, it's really because I'm on my knees. and things like that. There's like a dummy head that we attach. So we got these, like, I think they're M100s. And I don't know where I would have got the first one that I found and did the test on, but we put them either at the end of a BB gun or like attached to a dummy with a blood bag underneath and just like let it burn down and only show the point from the blast or explosion forward. Something else I did a lot in this kind of modified edit was I fixed the eye lines, which is something I couldn't have done in 1998. Digitally now it's a simple thing to just like flop the screen, so that at least the guy, it's like one character is looking off to the right and the other to the left. I can kind of fix some of that. And we filmed these things on different days, and a lot of times, that happens a lot in the reshoots that we did in 1996. I was trying to think if I did any in 1997, probably, but anyway, at that time I knew very specifically what I wanted to include, but I would often have like a VCR present nearby and rigged up so that I could kind of check it. But while it looks good for me to be looking up like that, we're kind of both looking up, which doesn't make sense. But it's much better that, for years I was actually looking the wrong direction there. All right, so the Despair book is the main feature that is in our piece here is the recollection of the death scene. And so I'll take this moment to explain, we filmed for that year shortly after seeing the Brandon Lee film, got us so excited about it, and finished it at age, I think I had just turned 16. So I remember like staying up all night doing the edit in the late summer, and then like going to driver's ed training, exhausted, like doing my supervisory driving. And, but anyway, so we were not old enough to include anything like that, anything like this scene then, with its very, just really disturbing content with this murder and rape. And, but so we finished the movie, and we'd been making action movies and stuff like that, kind of for the previous couple of years, from 12 or whatever. We did like these little cheesy movies where we'd click our fingers and the camera on a tripod and start and stop and we'd disappear. And then we did like, I don't know, it doesn't matter. But so this movie was the most mature subject matter we were approaching by far. And our early, scenes attempts were just terrible. And we would refilm things and it would gotten better and better. But we did finish a version in 1995 that we kind of distributed to our tiny high school of, I think there were like 300 people in the entire school, from freshman all the way up through senior class. And that's where, all of these people playing the characters came from that high school. and kind of did us the favor. Very few of which were interested in acting. The fellow that plays T-Bird here was kind of a well known in the school for his participation in drama and such. But so we finished a version of it, and then made video cover art and took pre-orders as in the month of October, and then hand delivered it to people on Halloween, October 31st of that year. And somewhere there's probably those 50 copies still kind of floating around. But by January of 96, I had learned just enough about editing and a few other filmmaking tricks, and especially in making that short film Prison Cell of Circumstance, that which was just like a minute and a half of like a visual collage to go along with like a lot of the Obar inspired poetry I was writing at the time. My angsty teenage writings made into like a film, and then I housed it in this like television that had bars on the front of it, and as like a paper mache of all the poems and this visual representation thereof. But I learned so much there that, again, I just wanted to apply it to this project. So in January 96, we started like filming augmenting scenes. And at that point, Matt grew kind of progressively less interested in it, as it became very much my mode of expressing myself, particularly being the main character and stuff, and all the emoting I get to do in this movie. It suited me as an outlet. So I'm running in my attic. That's the house that's about to be burnt down. Broke that window. I couldn't break the Gideon's glass, but for some reason, that real window in that real house, I was able to. Okay, so I was saying, so in 1998, by that time, like from like 96 through October of 98, I was kind of editing and augmenting the footage, and that the death scene was a really good example, I think, of like successfully translating the comic that I would have loved to have had that level of sophistication throughout. But anyway, that's one scene when you read it, it's so directly taken panel for panel that I can't separate it from our telling. So talk just a second here about the flashbacks of this stuff of us, dancing. Like, I kind of made it into a scene in the editing, but at the time, there's a little bit of play dancing in the Brandon Lee film, and I think our approach to these flashbacks had to do with some of that imagery, and occasionally there would be a line of dialogue like that was spoken, but it was generally just, oh, see that shot I found at the last minute. That's like the title panel for the death book. I was like, how did I not include that? It was weird. Anyway, again, I'm thankful to Josh for the opportunity to do this. I will say about that 1998 version, I was editing in a cable access center, and while I had certain sophistications at my disposal, there was no easy means of making the footage black and white. So what I had to do was turn down certain elements, like knobs on the front, like you might remember old televisions having, like analog stuff, to take out certain characteristics of the picture. And it seemed almost black and white, but it also stripped a lot of visual information that made this already very poorly lit and difficult movie to see nearly impossible to if your TV. And so I had a thing on the copies, like 100 copies of those went out to like people that were either in the movie that I sent postcards to after all these years, like a year out of high school, I think, and to people who ran Crow fan sites, and it kind of has a little bit of a following, I guess, as an underground piece because of that. But anyway, so for this remastered kind of expanded anniversary edition, what I ended up doing was buying the professional deck, like the Panasonic AG750, I think it was, that it had at the Cable Access Center. And I had to actually kind of repair it a little bit. I got it off eBay in 2018 and turned those knobs back up and put all that information back into it. And then I did a little test in 2018, and I think it was the Fear chapter, that opening scene of me like in the attic. And I was like, oh my God, it's like night and day. because I think in 2005 or so I put all this stuff on some sort of DVD for myself, and I loaned it to someone like in the last few years, and I realized that if you were looking at it on a computer, that like you couldn't see it, like all this stuff, like all this information was gone. Anyway, so the main thing started as like preserving and digitizing all of that footage and all of the behind the scenes footage. Here you'll see some very important added back shots connecting. So that's actually a double exposure of some fire and me looking back with lighters. But this shot of me standing in front of the burning house, I left out of that final cut in 1998. I know why I did. I didn't think it looked that great, but it's like, who cares how great it looks like you're standing in front of the house you burnt down? Like, what idiot? Take that out. This guy. But this guy also put it back. Oh, man. So here's the second scene with my sister and the Cat in the Hat book there that reappears. I feel like there's a lot of things I brought up that I kind of left hanging. Oh, I guess just to really finish up this thing about the versions. So I was shut down quite literally by Crow Vision Council in 2000. I had kind of created this digitally remastered version of the movie base that dressed it up as best I could. I didn't go back to the source tapes at the time, and I had made this half-hour making of that you can see on a video version of the Long Walk Short Drink podcast that I have with my buddy Palmer. We buried it in there, thinking that would be the only thing we could share with folks of that stuff. But so I was going to make it available through the website at cost, and was reaching out to people involved in the organization trying to get permissions. And I mean, way back in 95, like I had sent something to Kitchen Sink Press, who was the publisher of the graphic novel. And they, I'm just a kid. So like they sent me back a nice thing on letterhead that says, thanks so much. This is so cool. Send us a copy when you're done. But, and the internet was new, and it was just, in the late 90s and early 2000s and stuff. And so they shut me down. It was heartbreaking, and I wasn't able to share like all the documentary stuff that I was working on. But anyway, so I can't remember exactly how it came about, but one of the people who was really cool about the music was John Bergen, who had created this entire, here's more fire footage and actual shots of the firemen that, again, I did a little bit of double exposure with the, there's actually double exposure of smoke particles and such to kind of help communicate as though they were like right by the fire. But this is all stuff from that day when they were burning the house down. And in that 98 cut or whatever, you only ever hear them, you don't see them. Okay, so to try to get through this before the movie's over, John Bergen of Trust Obey was really cool about letting me use the music, and just like always, he's like, yeah, this is very cool, kind of like Kitchen Sink was in 95. But ultimately the Crow Vision had invested so many resources, and and it was a franchise at that time anyway. They're like, you have to cease and desist everything. So I did. But a couple years later, or by 2001, right when I was about to move away from from Ohio and from working, incidentally, you can see over my shoulder here, that is the Gideon's design, that I got in Wilmington, North Carolina, where The Crow was shot, and where in 2003 I nearly went to film school. In any event, but this was right before I left Ohio, and so I had the opportunity, or had enough kind of back and forth with the lawyer who had sent the cease and desist was gone. People were starting to like publish little clips of video on the internet, and I had this idea of what if I had it rescored it to John Bergen's music, who I had permission from, and then made it available for free. Like no money was exchanging, no cost, anything, just for free online, and had the ability, just barely, to kind of create these MPEG clips. And it was back and forth. I had this like from 2001 I created that. My brother, who you saw in that early scene, like created, by this point was an accomplished musician. His band Circle of Willis had some major label interest from Sony, that they got to make a record, but not for Sony, and didn't come out on Sony, but just to kind of give you a sense of like the accomplished musician he was by that time. And so he did a instrumental kind of cover version of the one ballad from that album called "Sleeping Angel," and that is what you hear in this. For all the romantic themes, and I said, there would be parts of it that I included throughout. So this version combines all of the music cues that, like this one from Black Flag, that I pulled into, from the albums I knew Obar to be listening to at the time. But all of the then instrumental music is either actual Trust Obey music from the '94 album, For Fear and Bullets, or the kind of expanded and remixed 1997 or 8 version of it that came out independent of the comic book, the Fear and Bullets album there, or it is kind of cover version of like instrumental that my brother made of that Sleeping Angel the Dreaming. So this is, I guess, the 4th version of this movie. Like there's the 1995 cut that was distributed in Rittman, Ohio, that I don't doubt is anywhere. There's the 1998 version that is kind of the basis of anything that would have survived on the internet, and then there was the 2001 version with the Trust Obey score that really never got or was seen by anybody, but was the way that I had experienced it now for years when I would occasionally meet someone and share it with them. So it's kind of the best of all of them, while adding back even things that I thought better of at the time. This was a scene that we refilmed in even quite a few times segments of in 1996 with our pal Corey there. And I think here I'm about to cut the Trust Obey logo actually, into my chest from the comic, that in that 98 or 2000 version, that was all you saw. You don't see this next shot because this next shot is from that 1995 footage and cut, and it doesn't look great, but at least you can see, that it's the crown of thorns, like it, so stuff like that. I just kind of I lost the sense of like, well, the effect's not great. I was like, well, I'd rather just see it than not see it. So at least you know what's going on. And in starting to look at some of that, you'll see like I included this, higher shot where you see it one more time here. Again, that was from that early version. And the Skull Cowboy here returns to kind of admonish Eric for being so easy on these guys, which was something we added. I think that You Are Alone was in the script for the Brandon Lee film. But we had this moment where he healed him because, again, we filmed things out of order. Supposedly self-inflicted wounds wouldn't heal, but we needed this kind of the scarring to go away. So that's why we had this moment. Our little homage to Highlander, to fall on the knees. So all of these shots are very directly from the comic book. I did extend this quite a bit to kind of let the cigarette burn down as though the life is like draining out of Fun Boy. And I think if anything, that 98 cut / 2001, again, here I kind of, the scratches you see there are just from, whatever the letter opener I was using but it seemed like it got healed, Anyway, this scene is a good example of making use of footage from all the different cuts over the years and adding back small moments here or there to kind of make the best possible version without filming anything new. Obviously, that would have been impossible. Boy, my breathless commentary there. So I just want to say a little thing here about our friend Corey, who we filmed with a ton, and who I think did a pretty good job ultimately, and was happy to see that folks responded well to, over the years, and internet posts I would see. Obviously a panel right from the comic book that we wouldn't have included in that 1995 version because we didn't curse in that one either, so the motherfucker would have not been there. All right, we're getting to the end here. So in this, I extended some parts of this of T-Bird kind of walking to his car, panicking a bit, like, all my guys are dying. And I follow here right up to the point where when I was actually following the guy that played this Ken, I stepped in a hole right after he inhales his cigarette there. And then ultimately you would see my my reflection as he crossed the street and stuff. But here, so I'm about to include shots from me driving in the same area for those. So like some of these shots you're seeing kind of what would be from T-Bird's point of view were to try to show the neighborhood a little bit more. And they were actually what I filmed to show in the opening narration. But I added back for this some more of him kind of talking to himself and letting the music play out a bit more to ramp up before Eric kind of pops out of the back seat here. And this, so I guess this was a scene that I kind of wrote to in 1995 that to kind of, we couldn't do like the car chase and the big massacre. We had scheduled that and tried to have a bunch of people show up. 30 people like all said they were going to show up, and only one did, and we actually quit the movie for a few months in late 94 because of that. But so we knew we weren't going to be able to do that big massacre that happens in the book, and so we kind of condensed it to this. And it's of the early stuff from that first year. This is one of my favorite scenes. Ken is a much better actor than some of the people who had no interest in acting, and it was a full moon, and I think it was March, and it was cold, and you could see our breath, and I was really able, at this point I'd really kind of gone beyond just completely imitating Brandon Lee, and kind of had a connection to Eric and Eric's rage that I was able to really unleash a bit here. And so even though it's handheld, a lot of it, you can see the moon a little bit there in the clouds. It's a good example of the kind of cool things about the kernel of like what we were doing that I think propelled me to kind of keep augmenting the project with my new knowledge and skills in those 4 years, and even in the last couple of months. Oh, this is another moment I extended here too, where I kind of did use some digital tools and kind of creating extra reverb for his howls of pain. Obviously the sound effects of the gun and stuff are not great, and actually I think I tried to like look up on YouTube to find ones that might be a little better, but I ultimately just needed to sample what I had from the time. And actually, so the way that like the video editing worked in 98, when I was able to kind of create and mix it at this cable access center, is like there are 2 tracks of audio on a video, professional video at that time. And so I would make use, kind of like a 4-track, if you think about a 4-track. And so I would have on one that were kind of like the effects, and one was like the music at times. And so I was able to, in getting this professional deck in 2018 and digitizing these, I was able to digitize those channels separately so that I could effectively remix this movie one more time. It's so silly. You can see our little bullet hole hits that came from the first costume shop, Mr. Fun's and Cuyahoga Falls trip in 1994. And it's cool, it ends, even though it's a written scene, it does end with like T-Bird, all broken down in front of his car, and Eric holding a claw hammer, and it goes to black. But our comic goes to black like that. But I needed this last shot of like Eric swinging towards the camera that I ultimately like. We edited a lot in camera, so even though I was able, like, putting all this footage back and stuff, there was very little to do about it in the way that you would, most films. Because I was cutting it like in the moment. I would kind of take it back and watch the scene and like, switch it very quickly from playback to record, and that was like at that moment was where the edit would be. This last scene here of me, you can see the house that would have matched the church and the little wooden gravestone or like grave we made. This is from our very first 20-minute tape in 1994. And that is actually the oldest I am in this movie. I'm 18 there, embracing the Lady Death. And we found the statue, the same statue in Akron, Ohio. Anyway, thank you for watching. And I breathlessly tried to relay anything I thought might be of interest to you. The Inertia documentary, you can see sort of the behind the scenes of all this and us making this movie. Then I'm grateful to Josh and Lunch Meat for, helping me. giving me the excuse to kind of re-engage with this material in this very full way, so that 20 years from now I'm able to like watch this digitally and be able to actually see it and you know feel proud of it. It was a weird way to spend one's youth, for sure. And there's so many years of my life I kind of gave to this thing that I think I was reticent for a long time to take the time to make these changes. But I'm really happy to have had this opportunity to do so. I'm very grateful to you for watching along with me. If you want to see more of the kind of behind the scenes and sort of period accurate commentary that actually gives a lot more information than I was able to impart on this, those will be somewhere online. I don't know as of this recording, but you can check those out. But on October 3rd, 2020, still talking about his teenage adaptation of The Crow. It's David Ullman saying one more time, thanks very much for watching.